Hi, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining tonight's event. Sorry for keep you waiting while we were trying to resolve some technical issues. Today's event is called Industrial and Cultural Heritage of the Ma On Shan Iron Mine Landscape. I'm Florence Chen, President of AIA Hong Kong. Each year, AIA Hong Kong gives out honorary affiliated membership to individuals of esteemed character who have made their distinguished service to our profession and also to our built environment. Tonight's speaker, Professor Mi Can was elected as honorary member of AIA Hong Kong last year. Professor Ng holds a number of titles in the Chinese University of Hong Kong. These include Vice Chairman of the Department of Geography and Resource Management, Director of Urban Studies Program, Director of the Institute of Future Cities and also of the Hong Kong Institute of Asian Pacific Studies. Professor Ng got her PhD in urban planning from UCLA. She directs the urban study program at Chinese University that teaches students to understand and solve various urbanization problems with a strong focus on sustainability. I'm particularly amazed by the variety of research topics conducted by Professor Ng, which include reviews of Hong Kong planning standards and guidelines from the perspective of the well-being of people, investigation into the concept of commons in the new territories, as well as low carbon living in high density environment. As you can imagine, there's quite a wide range of topics that Professor Ng are looking into. And tonight, we are very honored to have Professor Ng to share with us her research on Ma On Shan Iron Mine Quarry. With that, I'm handing over to you, Professor Ng.
Okay, thank you, Florence, for your kind introduction. I want to thank AIA Hong Kong chapter for giving me the honorary membership. And I'm very happy to share the research on Ma On Shan with you. Actually, the research is and sort of like an interdisciplinary, efforts by colleagues. And so let's turn to the English side. So we do have, you can actually, well, there are actually 2 videos that originally I would like to show to you. As you can see, I hope you can see the website, the screen. However, I don't know why the share doesn't allow me to share the sound, and also I cannot optimize the video, so I can only show you this website. And if you are interested, you can go to the website and actually watch the video. So one video is actually on the industrial heritage, and the other video is on the cultural dimension. So so maybe it's just so bad that we cannot really watch the video, which could save me a lot of efforts in trying to explain, the situation to you using, just a 2-dimensional PowerPoint. But we cannot beat the technology, so maybe that's what we have to live with. Okay, so I don't know how many of you actually have been to Ma On Shan. So it's very close to CHK, and if we, sometimes in the Chung Chi College where I belong to, in the chapel, we can actually see Ma On Shan. Okay, so what I want to do tonight is to introduce you the project. I mentioned that it's an interdisciplinary project. I've got colleagues from School of Architecture, from anthropology, and colleagues working on economics, sociology, joining to do this piece of work. So, so I will sort of then talk about the industrial heritage conservation and give you sort of like a brief history. And then we'll share some of the thoughts that we think that conserving Ma On Shan, is important, and also focus on the cultural heritage, of the place. So this project is actually sponsored by the Built Heritage Conservation Fund. We actually submitted the final report. So hopefully, if you are interested, you can actually read the full report online later on at the Built Heritage Conservation Fund website, I guess. So what we try to do is that if you've been to Ma On Shan Iron Mine, or just Ma On Shan Country Park, people usually go there. They go there without knowing that there is, a great story in the landscape. What we sort of try to do is that, we want to see, although it's just a place, this iron mine, but actually if we trace the physical, economic, social, cultural, and religious development, in that particular site, we can actually have a glimpse of the history of Hong Kong, history of China, history of Asia, and the world history. So that's another added level of understanding of what we want to introduce, in conservation studies about pond line plain. So the government's idea of pond line plain is like, you've got all these interesting structure with architectural values, then you link, these structures together as a line, and then, they occupy an area, and that's the plain. That's our approach to the whole study as well. But as a social scientist and an urban planner, I think Ma On Shan actually sort of like, it's a very interesting site for us to learn, so much more than that area, because you go to one place and that allows you to appreciate the connections, not just of various sectoral dimensions, but actually chronologically as well. So I hope I can, convince you later on that, that's really a site that worth visiting. Now, the industrial heritage conservation, I think we all know that include the tangible dimensions and the intangible dimensions. So the tangible dimensions include the buildings, the landscape, the settlements. So when you have economic activities, very often you will have human settlements next to it. And that's why you have the industrial and the cultural heritage in the site. So later on, you will see that we have the mine on one side, and then, we have the living, areas on the other side, and that constitute a very important context for the value of the landscape. So we also have the tangible, heritage, including maybe the machineries, the offices, or even some of the documents. And the intangible one include like our knowledge, now the knowledge about like mining, how work was organized, people's memory of the past, and also, of course, the sort of the cultural dimension of the site. So in the study, we use the Dublin principles to try to understand, the value of this place, and how can we provide recommendations for the government to conserve the place. So that include, proper documentation, and also policies that will really protect and maintain, the sites. I have to say that, we are not doing very well in this area. And then it's also very important to communicate the importance of the site to different stakeholders, like what I'm doing, here tonight. Okay, the Ma On Shan Iron Mine, the history is a pity that we cannot show the video. The video will show you, the history of it. Now, before I talk about the history, I want to sort of like, just in case if you don't really know the place. Now, this is the iron ore. Actually, there's still several million tons of iron ore under Ma On Shan, so you have to practice your geographical imagination and think about, like, this is the landscape, and you've got the iron ore down here. So that's why at first they tried to sort of like dig the mine open cast, in an open cast fashion. And then later on with the Japanese investment, I'll explain why the Japanese came in. So because of this thickness, so you could imagine that they kind of like, blasted at a certain level, maybe at, 240 mile level. And then they dig, tunnels and have all the mines, traveling down to the 110 mile level, and then they build a tunnel to sort of like, you can imagine, so this is the iron ore that you got all these lines, which are sort of like the underground kind of like caves where they do the blasting, and then they will transport the the ore to the sort of like foothill level, and then they build this 2.2 kilometers of tunnel, and then send it to the ore dressing plant or the mineral processing plants. And at that time, no Ma On Shan new town. So again, exercise your geographical imagination that this is actually the coastline and this was the pier, and that's how they transport the ore to Japan. Okay, so just give you some ideas about the operation of the whole thing. Now, the iron ore in Ma On Shan is what we call the magnetic iron ore. It has magnetic property, which is very important for making steel. And that's why, Japan, although the quality actually is not very high, but the Japanese investors consider that if they use their technology to build sort of a modern, processing plant at that time, it could raise the quality of the iron ore and still be useful for the reindustrialization of Japan. So actually, if you know Chater Garden, right? So Sir Chater actually started the exploration of iron ore in this area back, in the early 20th century. Well, if you history was always very interesting. He actually harbored the ambition of developing iron and steel industry in Hong Kong. I was so glad that that didn't materialize. Otherwise our city will be heavily polluted. And but that ambition, died down, after his death, back in 1926. So the first half of the 20th century, very little happened in Ma On Shan due to 2 world wars and also a global depression in the 30s, and of course the Japanese occupied Hong Kong back in 1941 to 45. So because of the Japanese occupation, they discovered Ma On Shan. They actually did something in Ma On Shan, and that's why after the Second World War, originally the airline force didn't want Japan to be strong again. I think that's why the site is so interesting. So, but then of course, the event was that China turned socialist, right? After 1949, okay? And then, because China turned socialist with the Soviet bloc, and we know then, that we started the Cold War, and the Allied force started to realize that they could not make, Japan weak all the time. They need to make Japan strong again and allowing Japan to reindustrialize. So in the past, before the Second World War, Japan got her raw materials from China, especially the northeastern part of China. They, of course, could not go back to China. So the Allied force allowed Japan to come to Southeast Asia to source raw materials. And because they occupied Hong Kong before, they knew about the Ma On Shan Iron Mine. So that's why the company came to Hong Kong, and they sort of like, agree that they would build this processing plant to boost the quality of the iron ore for the use of the Japanese economy. So this is a kind of like a timeline that is in the 1950s to the 1970s. That's almost like the golden period for the development of Ma On Shan. And it had to do with the Cold War. It had to do with, Japan coming to do this joint venture with the mutual, mining and trading company. That company actually, when they first started, it's just a trading company, and they tried to export the ore to Japan at that time, because at that time the government had a policy which allowed the company to buy back some goods from Japan, and so they just tried to do trading. They didn't have much knowledge about iron ore mining, and so the Japanese investment became very important. They sort of like do this iron this ore dressing plant or the mineral processing plants. And then they closed the open cast and turned everything underground to save transportation from, kind of like the hilltop to the coastal areas. They also built the tunnels to sort of like increase the efficiency of the whole operation. That's why you can see growing sort of like outputs. But until the 1970s, it was closed in 1976. So although, of course, if you look at this chart, it seems like we're producing fine, but actually, Ma On Shan's production compared to the huge mines in other parts of the world, like Australia, has no comparison at all. And we were really minuscule for Japan's economy. And given the fact that by the 70s, Hong Kong had this economic takeoff, and also labor, costs become very high, and so we are not very competitive, by then. So we have this short period when we have, a pretty impressive growth. So this is the open pit mining areas. This is some of the old photographs. And another thing which I think make this area very interesting is that after 1949, besides sort of like the flooding in of people who may not appreciate communism, or the Kuomintang armies, or the capitalists, and a lot of other people who would like to be more adventurous in other parts of the world, they came to Hong Kong. The Communist Party also, drove out a lot of missionaries. I think at one point, probably Hong Kong had the highest density of missionaries, in the world. But anyway, so the missionaries, they, at that time, they really went to places where they could find people who need help. So all these refugees coming as miners, living a very hard life. So these missionaries, some of them are actually just missionary students, or like, theological students. They came to Ma On Shan and they started to, serve these people. And very, it's not just the Lutheran church, it's also the Catholic Church as well. So we've got this St. Joseph Church compound. It's built by the Franciscan brothers. So I think it's very interesting. I mean, if you have registered to go on the field trip, and you can see there's two churches, right? I mean, think about this. It's Catholic and Lutheran, right? The Protestant, the first Protestant church. And they were like, trying to stay in the same area, trying to serve the people, there. So that's a joint venture between, the Japanese and also this guy in the Mutual Mining and Trading Corporation, and they work together to build the iron ore, the iron mine, and they also bring in formal kind of like company organization, as you can see, with say civil engineering section, transportation, mechanical section, etc. But then at that time, there are actually two kinds of economic operations, in the place. One is this formal organization. It's under that sort of like company with joint venture with Japanese technological support. And then you've got this subcontracting section, which are the miners. So the miners work under subcontractors, and they work, as a team for this company. So it's quite an interesting sort of like, if you look at it from an economic perspective. So this is the processing plants. So today you can't really see it. You can just see some, concrete slabs, and you can see from here, this is the tunnel with the railway, which transport the ore to these processing plants, and then they will crush the ore, and then they will grind it. The whole process is mechanical. There's no chemical involved, because you can imagine, you might have play this IQ question, right? So what you need to do is you just have one big magnet, then you can extract all the iron out. So the whole thing is actually mechanical, and you can see that you know, after this processing, and they will sort of transport the ore you know, to the coastal areas. I think in the early 1970s, they actually built a conveyor belt, which make the whole thing sort of like automatic as well. So if you go to the field trip, you can still see one of the pillars that supported these this railway, you know, which come out from the tunnel, but the rest of it you cannot see. I was told that when the mine was closed, the Japanese didn't you know, take things back to Japan, but then local people did not realize the importance of this kind of heritage, and so everything is being dismantled. It's very sad. So the mining technologies, as I've said, originally they tried to do this open pit mining, but then later on they do everything underground. Okay, so again, it's a pity that we cannot show you the video, but this is how it's done. Okay, so say for example, you've got this very thick, you know, ore, and so they divided it into different levels, and then they will have the caves, you know, carved up, and then they will use dynamite to blast it, right? And then they will have all these, you know, shafts and tunnels, which allow them to sort of like, instead of like in the early years of operation, they had put everything into a truck, a lorry, and then they transport everything to the processing plant, which, you know, it was very polluting to the environment, used a lot of energy, and it's very dangerous as well because it's a very hilly area. So using this is a lot easier. So when all the ore is at the 110 level, then they will use the sort of like the automobiles on rails to ship it to the processing plant. So again, you can see this is the iron ore, that's the tunnel going to the processing plant and the pier, and you can see some, like, you know, that's the situation inside. You can imagine that even in a very hot day, it's quite cool inside, you know, the mine. But of course, it's also, you know, after the mine was closed, and when some of the miners, especially those miners who came from China, from different provinces, who could not master Cantonese, they kind of like got stuck in the peak because they could not really communicate with, you know, people in the city. And so many of them actually got this lung, you know, problems because at that time, this industrial safety was not an issue. People had very little knowledge of that. So in terms of architecture and relics of the iron mine, we do have this, you know, this is the 240 meter entrance. We can go and see on Saturday. This is the 110 level. And then that's the processing plant I mentioned, but only the concrete, you know, left. There's, in those days, the companies actually, because it's in a very remote location, and also the government was nothing like the government today. Government was, you know, featured very little in these people's life, you know, had no role at all. Obviously, it's a colonial government, and what do you expect, right? So this company provide a lot of things like, you know, they have this communal eating places. They will also, instead of salary, they will also distribute sort of like items that they can consume on a daily basis. They will also provide clinics, you know, etc. Now, as I've mentioned, right? So if you look at this is the mining areas, and there's a river flowing through. This is a dumping site. It's not a mine. So the yellow patches here are some of the settlements, and these settlements spread to the middle level, and also the middle level, and also the hillside. Here is called the Sunyi New Village. This is where we're going to gather if you have registered for the field trip. one side is the production side, this side is the living areas, okay? And I think one amazing thing, at least for me as a planner and social scientist, is that although it's actually, at its, peak time, there are only several thousand people living in this area, but there were 2 markets, okay? Now they got a market in the peak area. Is this called, this is Eatery Street, right? Many sort of like good food that you can actually patronize. So the situation was like this. Of course, it's a remote area, and sometimes, and then people from different parts of China. So you could imagine that people have different cuisines, and if sometimes the miners, they got hurt, in the mine and could not really continue with their work, and they need to survive, right? And so they try to sort of like cook their home food, and then they can go and sell it. And this is, I was told, quite a popular street at that time. And sometimes, and also like people living in this mid-level areas, they are the Chiu-Chow community. So they very soon, originally some of them were miners, but they found mining too hard, and they are very smart. They started to do farming, like growing vegetables, growing pigs, and then selling to this community. So that's the peak area. Its high point was when, before the company turned everything underground, right? So, but after they turn everything underground, when all this tunnel will ship everything to do the processing and the export, then it's the harbor, the coastal or the pier area market, which becomes very popular, very interesting. So I think that's very interesting from a planning perspective, that sometimes we maybe over plan and over design, and if you just let things to grow organically, it's actually even more interesting. So this is the production area, and here you've got sort of like several human settlements emerged as a result of this mine, which contribute to the cultural dimensions. Like the Sunyi new village is actually a village built sort of like contributed by the Lutheran Church, but the Lutheran Church didn't want to just give the house to the people. They would like them to sort of have this sense of responsibility. It's actually a very interesting arrangement. I wish I could have a house like that, because although the house is not very big, but they have huge gardens. It's actually a cooperative with the agricultural, fishery and conservation department. So I think the government was quite nice at that time. So this kind of cooperative is seems that they can last forever. These buildings cannot be sold, cannot be bought and sold, but then it's hereditary. So their offspring can inherit the building. So I don't really know how this kind of scheme can wind down or evolve. So this is the foothill area. Because of the building of the new town, the pier settlement was gone, which is it's a pity. And then we've got the mid-level areas, the Chiu-Chow area, where they have quite interesting architecture, and they have their own temples, etc. Actually, because of the existence of the Lutheran Church and the Catholic Church, all the people that we interviewed who used to live in Ma On Shan, they were either Protestant or they were they are Catholic. Of course, not maybe many not becoming really practicing Christians, but we heard all sorts of interesting stories, because the two churches kind of had a bit of competition, and so you will have in those days, there usually are quite a few kids in a family. So in order to get the benefits from both worlds, so they would send half of the kids to the Catholic Church and half of the kids to to the Protestant Church. Quite interesting kind of like knowledge of the past. So this is that was this photo was of course about the past. Today, you can still see some settlements, but not in this kind of scale. It's not as dense, and you probably cannot see that many, flat huts in the area. And this is the St. Joseph Church. I don't think we can go in, but as architects, I'm sure you will be fascinated if you got the opportunity to go in. We were very lucky that, although we got the letter from the government allowing us to go in to do the investigation and measurements, etc., the lady didn't allow us to go. But one time when we went up, there was a temporary guard. He probably didn't know what's going on. And then we showed him the letter, he allowed us to go in. And so we could actually take a lot of photos of this church. So if you stand at the gate of the Catholic Church, you can see the Lutheran Church, clearly. So, or vice versa, So this is the Lutheran Church. The Lutheran Church actually got money from the Built Heritage Conservation Fund, and they've done sort of like renovation, in phases. So if you go to the field trip, we'll go there as well, and they will have a mini museum that allow us to appreciate the old days. And they also serve very good coffee, as well as iron ore cookies, which are quite tasty. So this is we took this after Mungat, so you can see the typhoon. So you can see the top of the Catholic Church was gone, but I think it was like they replaced it afterwards. And this side is actually the Lutheran Church side, and then you can see the buildings. This picture was drawn by a lady. Again, if you watch the video, she's featured in the video, recounting how her teacher made an impact on her life, and how what she taught her has become a key kind of like philosophy when she continued to teach her students. So she's an art teacher, is her work, recounting her childhood home. Okay, so reminding, we are looking at industrial heritage, but unnecessarily it will include the cultural dimensions. So I will very quickly take you through the pond line plane ideas that we have, because that's what we need to do. Now, I guess everyone understands what is grade 1, grade 2, grade 3 in Hong Kong. Grade 1 is supposed to be the highest. We should keep the whole thing intact as far as possible, and then less so for grade 2 and grade 3. But we all understand that this grading is very weak. It has no legal protection. People can still demolish the thing. And for Ma On Shan, it's pretty sad in a sense, because many of these very interesting sites, except the Lutheran Church, all these are actually being exposed to nature, and nothing has been done so far. Anyway, now for the plane, we kind of like carved out this area. This is exactly the kind of boundary that we suggest that maybe we can have a plane which include all the ponds, and which can be connected as a line. And we decided on this using the landscape character map produced by the planning department in the early 2000s, the 2000s, sorry. And they do this differentiation through using the nature and cultural dimensions as well. So we include actually, I think, if we don't consider the tunnel, which kind of like spans through the upper land and hillside, the settled valley, and the peak landscape. Actually, I think the most important part would be this, what we call the settled valley landscape. Okay, so this is the most important. But because the tunnel goes through the other landscape as well, so we include them. So this is the what we call the Sato Valley landscape, which actually include all the mining and the cultural settlements, and the peak landscape is to accommodate the tunnel. And then, of course, this orange part is right next to the new town. It's called the residential urban fringe landscape, which has the Sunyi village, the 110 tunnel facade, and also the processing plants. And we identify these 18 points, which include, you know, a bridge. This is a bridge stone, which links the mining area with the living areas. If you go on the field trip, you will be able to see. And we also found out, you know, a house where it used to be a store to sell products to the people. And when we visited that place a few years ago, they still have all the old, you know, equipments there, and the whole design is still very much the same, which is so amazing. And they also have an old age, you know, association. We probably will drop by here to have a look as well. So these are the sort of like 18 points. Now the vision was a living museum. So hopefully for those who go to, you know, Ma On Shan, you will also, you know, become an advocate for this vision. So what we want to do is that because this is such an important place where you can actually connect, you know, with the past, right? With all this history, different layers of history. And also it's actually very important for people living in Ma On Shan to know that there is such a great story, you know, it's just at their backyard. So we hope that, you know, if we can turn this into a living museum, we can actually reconnect the past, the present, and the future, allowing people to really reconsider about, you know, their existing situations. Thinking about, you know, in those days in Ma On Shan, people live in a hard, you know, people live a hard life. But then think about the two churches, you know, their selfless dedication to serving the people. And then among the people, because it's so isolated from the city, and also not much help from the government, not so much welfare. So they need to practice reciprocity and mutuality. And also all these great teachers who, you know, who were living comfortably in the urban areas, but they didn't mind going to Ma On Shan, you know, taking so much trouble to go and teach the kids. So I think it's actually a very interesting kind of like, you know, story that that's worth continuing, you know, to be known, to be told. And we did a survey to ask people's opinions about our ideas. As you can see from this percentage, we have majority support. So we suggested that, you know, for the 18 points, we can use, say, augmented reality to allow people to see this is actually the open cast area being reclaimed by nature. So if we can use a bit of technology, then people can actually sort of like see like how it looked like in the past. Or we consulted engineers. This is the 240, you know, mile level entrance. The engineer used to work in the government, and he said from his assessment, this 240 kind of like entrance should be okay to support, you know, the changing of the space into like an exhibition area where people can actually go and have an understanding of how the mine was, you know, was run, and also hopefully, if possible, to have a glimpse of how of the inside of the caves. Currently, although people actually did go into the cave illegally, but the government actually had closed the mine. So this is the 110 sort of like mile level entrance, and with some strengthening work, maybe people can also go there to do, you know, to take some photos, etc., to understand how things work. Now, the processing plant, you know, if we transplant it to today's location, something like this. So we suggested perhaps we can make a lookout, again, using some augmented reality, that people can actually sort of trace back, you know, the old peak settlements, etc., that to sort of help people to appreciate life in the past. So that's the current situation. It probably was even worse now. But if we can restore it, then it can be actually used for all sorts of activities like retreat or some educational functions. I mentioned about Lutheran Church. They run the Grace Youth Camp, where they have an exploratory sort of like outlet for Ma On Shan, trying, I mean, again, it's a pity that we cannot show the video. I think they focus on industrial heritage, cultural heritage, religious, heritage, and also the geological, context of the site to do their sort of like conservation work. So we can also do the heritage trails. We can actually invite some of those former residents, some became professors, other were teachers, and so they can actually, we can use their work to decorate all these boards for the tourists. So the three, and we also identified three main settlement areas. So in the Peak district, it's actually the area where you've got the highest level of integrity and authenticity of the buildings and the structures, etc. And then, the Lutheran Church obviously is a natural anchor of the place. We think that that can be a sort of like a base for the revitalization of religious activities, or we can use some of the vacant sort of like short-term tenancy huts for teaching, learning ground for students. I mean, when we were there at first, we thought that, well, CUHK should sponsor, this place, and then maybe the architecture students can go and do sort of like, their practice and learning there. So we can actually organize a lot more programs and activities for the general public. So basically, we think that this area should, as far as possible, kept intact, for conservation activities. And then there's another cluster at the foothill. If you pay attention to a recent planning case, the government is going to build some public housing there. And for us, we understand that it's so close to the new town, that kind of development probably would be inevitable. But then the problem is that the current treatment is that the government will just not touch the heritage sites and just make sure that their construction boundary is outside, and will not affect the heritage. But our idea is that actually, if the government is doing such a big project, probably that's a golden opportunity for the government to actually use the resources to incorporate this, maybe the tunnel, or do the outlook at the processing plants, or to work with the Sunyi new village to bring this into the new development as part and parcel of areas that the residents can visit and learn from. We think that, like, think about these processing plants or the tunnel, the whole mining operation, very important as what we call STEAM subjects, right? You can learn about science, technology, engineering, arts, math, etc. So we think there's a lot of potential for for incorporating this heritage into new developments. We made this suggestion. We don't know whether the government, will listen or not. And then for the mid-levels, when we did the research, the mid-level, the Chiu-Chow community, I hope there's no Chiu-Chow people here, but they are not very easy to approach. And even the social workers or the Lutheran church people fail to really contact them. But again, with the same as the Ma On Shan, I mentioned about the plan. In that plan, besides building some public housing at the foothill, the plan was to build housing, medium-rise housing in the mid-level areas right next to the country park. Actually, I mean, all these boundary, this side, this green line is actually the country park. So it's like really, incredible. I cannot believe it that the government is going to build, so close to the country park. So a lot of people object to it, and we also brought the story of Ma On Shan to the town planning board. So to cut a very long story short, the town planning board dropped that part, and they would just, do development at the foothill. And because of that plan, a lot of the Chiu second, third generation people, they appeared in the town planning board trying to tell the story of Ma On Shan. And so that's how we started to reconnect with them. So now, it's easier to really go and talk to them because of that incident. Anyway, so I think I'm going to, I actually overrun, but I will be done in a few minutes, in a couple of minutes. So I think for the cultural dimensions, as I've said, so the Ma On Shan is actually, a product of multi-scalar socioeconomic formation. It's just like Hong Kong. It's like a micro, a micro version of it. It's interesting because companies at that time, they really provide a lot of support to the people. I'm not glorifying them, of course. I mean, they are not really, they can do more, but given the conditions, I mean, they provide them with food, with entertainment, with health services, and I think that is quite interesting, And also, Ma On Shan played a very important role in training Hong Kong's workforce, because in the mine they need to use dynamites, right? So they have become the training ground for the people eventually who contributed to the building of the MTR, to the tunnels in the city. So it's quite amazing. But of course, that also, the mining activities also, have left grave imprints on, the environment. I didn't sort of, you can see it on Saturday, you can still see these natural landslides, probably because of the mining and the cave and the sort of like hollowed ground. At that time, they didn't have this idea that you need to refuel, the cavities in order to maintain sort of like the integrity of the natural structure. There's also the power of local economic development, that when people cannot really sort of rely on the sort of the business or markets, then they will generate their own economic activities. A lot of things for us to learn today, right, to allow the growth of local economic development. And I think the faith-based organizations and all the teachers, as I've mentioned, they are very crucial for the nurturing of the people there. All the people that we try to interview, to understand from their oral histories, the place, they always wear a smile on their face, and their eyes always like, twinkle as if they were thinking of, their good old days. But actually their good old days were pretty poor and resource scarce. But then it's this, very loving environment, very, reciprocal kind of relationships, very relational, very rich relational relationships, which sort of like, allow them to have really good memory. And also they always recount about, how basically they say that the mountain is their playground, the fish, the streams, the crabs in the water, are their toys. It's just this very important blue-green infrastructure, the water systems, the greenness, the green environments. They are so important for nurturing people who eventually become very positive and very resilient adults. Okay, so I think conclusion is that, okay, it's a mine, it's a joint venture, tell us something about history, very important at different levels, and also allow us to appreciate that, you go into a place, it just tells you so much more, right? I mean, if we really go and study it, you know more about its economy, economic development, social development, cultural development, history, etc. And that 20 years, the golden period of Ma On Shan actually was made possible because of the influx of the migrants and obviously the missionaries. And then this very dedicated services, this very other-centered approach to life, which I think has been very inspiring for generations of people living in Ma On Shan. So I remember in one of our engagement activities, she said, look, everyone talk about the Lion Rock spirit, But the Lion Rock spirit is actually fabricated. I mean, of course, we do have that, but then it's just a TV show, right? But the Ma On Shan spirit is a true Hong Kong spirit, right? It's actually, it happened, and it's still being remembered by many people who have experienced it. And I think that is so true. And the whole study, I think, sort of like, we confirmed sort of like my understanding that it's just so important to have place-based knowledge. And also, I think all our documentation, our interviews, our study prove that there is great conservation value in the Ma On Shan Iron Mine landscape, not just the relics, the structures, but also the cultural, the religious, and the social legacies. And I think they are invaluable educational resources, especially today when Hong Kong has become a rather divided society. So we actually also provided other recommendations, suggesting that the government really should reconsider its institutional setup, because the current way of conservation in Hong Kong is still very building or structure based, and not like a landscape kind of like approach. So we hope the government will do something, along that direction. And we also made another suggestion, because we understand that conservation requires resources. And what we try to argue is that, we all live in the city and contribute to the value of the city. So we suggested that perhaps when the government sell land, given that we all contribute to, this huge and extraordinary, high value of land, maybe a certain percentage of that sort of like money should be put back as like a fund for conservation. So I think that's what I want to cover tonight. And if you are interested, please visit our website, where you can actually watch the 2 videos that I failed to show. I'm sorry, it seems I use up all the time. Sorry about this. Okay, Florence, you need to unmute.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah. Thank you, Professor Wu, for the wonderful presentation.
Just call me Mika.
Yes. So I got a question from the floor here. From
I can see
Professor
that.
Nelson Chan, which I think is a good way to start the discussion.
Hi, Nelson. A very good colleague, very supportive of our program. Yeah.
Yes. And well, how did you first discover this Ma On Shan iron ore?
Well, actually, okay. And also the question is about the working population at the peak period. I heard figures from 1,500 to 3,000, so I'm not sure which figure is right. We could not find like concrete historical documents. So these are from published work, but then and also some people's memories, right? So how could I discover it? Actually, I have to say that, as I've mentioned, this is a multi-disciplinary efforts. I didn't know about this gem, this hidden gem, as Nelson said. When BHCF called for proposals, I worked with my colleagues, and then we thought of like, what we could do. And one of my colleagues, whose name is Dr. Joanna Lee, she actually did also a very important study on the Ma On Shan Iron Mine with money from the district council. And so we thought about like, maybe because we're so close to Ma On Shan, so it seems like it's our natural responsibility to do something, with the place. So we actually went on a field trip. And once we went there, and then, I think the whole team, kind of like fell in love with the place and the story. And I think the story is really very heartwarming, and so that's how, so we wrote the proposal, and we were very lucky to get the money to do the work. Yes.
I see. Well, I was fascinated by your proposal for the Living Museum. So is there any plans for selling it to the government about this idea, or like how Any suggestions?
Well,
Yeah, because looking at, for example, like examples such as Lychee Wall, or now what they're looking at, Gukbo, there seems to be like a renewed interest in the countryside, and whether there is any opportunities we can push this forward.
Yeah, I think the countryside office, they're also very interested, and they're very kind, actually, I think, because they have this rule about cultural revitalization that will, the place need to be like what 500 meters from the transportation point or whatever. But I think they actually have contacted Lutheran Church to see whether more resources can be put to help with their revitalization work. I mean, personally, I would also be interested to do more, to do deeper research for the mid-level, settlements as well. But I've been like really caught up with work. But in terms of really like overall approach, changing the policy from structure or building based to landscape based, or putting more resources into conservation, I think we still need more efforts from everyone to convince the government that, a site like this need to be properly conserved so that we can continue to tell, this very important story to our future generations.
So like from that perspective, what we can do to help?
That's a really good question. If you have any capacity to talk to the government who, are responsible for this area, it would be good to really, remind them about this, because they got so many things to handle, and we can appreciate that unless there's certain amounts of pressure or interest. Otherwise, I think the government probably will not put this at very high priority. I mean, the fact that they would have, an outline zoning plan, a draft outline zoning plan gazetted, and building sort of like estates, right, in a site which is so important to the integrity of the whole story, tells you at the same time when they have asked us to do the study. I'm sorry, this is recorded, so I probably will get myself into trouble. But I mean, that tells you the situation, And when I presented my research to the committee, who gave us the money to do the work, I got some comments saying that it will be very, very expensive to do conservation in the area. So I mean, that's why we thought of that suggestion of like getting a certain percentage of the land premium or whatever, for conservation, dedicated for conservation. Because I think I don't need to convert you guys. You guys must, architects are great, conservation advocates. That is so important for us to leave, properly our sort of good legacies to our future generations. And I think this landscape is definitely, one of them.
Has anyone done any like a structural assessment? Because just now you mentioned about like the over mining, that when they were doing this, like some of the landscape are being kind of damaged and potentially can have like structural issues.
Yes.
So,
I don't think there's any like serious proper assessment. I mean, that's why the government is now just shutting down the whole thing and not allowing people to go in. Although when you go there, I will tell you how other people try to sneak into the place. Sorry, Florence, you could not go.
I would say
I'm not sure if they closed that venue as well, but I know one way of going in. I was told, I dare not go in, because it's really, I think it's quite dangerous. But actually, yeah, but I was told that some of my friends that when they were small, they actually followed their father like many years ago, right? And they went in and they could go in they went in from the 240-mile level, and then they came out at the 110 level. So it's like, wow, they go through all the tunnels and shafts. Yeah.
Just like the metal ore.
yes, exactly. I don't know how they do it, but it would be great if we can do it. I'm sure it will be very popular. I mean, if it's structurally sound, because in Japan or in Taiwan, they have this kind of theme park.
Yeah.
So they reuse these old mines, and people can actually go in, and I think that would be really adventurous. I'm sure a lot of people would love to do that.
Yeah, actually, I think some people in Hong Kong are exploring a lot of this like underground. Like
yes.
Right?
Yes, they actually, Ma On Shan is one of their identified sites, as if they don't know there's such a story, or maybe they think there is originally so many cavities, so maybe they can do it. Anyway.
Yeah. So if anyone who are interested to explore, even though we won't be going to the tunnels, but we will going to a lot of those points that has been identified by Professor in her presentation.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, maybe I should very quickly do to talk about the field trip. Okay, so maybe I can you see?
Yeah.
Okay, so what we will do is that you need to do a bit of hiking. I don't know whether Claire sent out the materials to those who have registered for the field trip. So this is, if you don't know, this is Ma On Shan.
This will be sent out tomorrow.
Oh, okay, okay. So this is the hang-on station. If you are environmentally friendly and want to test your own physical fitness, then you get out from hang on, and then you can go all the way to this part of the city. Now, you cannot cross at the roundabout. It's very dangerous, and I don't want to lose anyone. So there is actually an underpass around this area that you can go from this side, so that you can actually walk along this route. So this is the route that you go up to, and then you will go sort of like okay, so you go to that route. Where is my, let me go back to the map, cannot see it here. Okay, so you go along this route, and then you will go to the you will sort of go all the way around and up to here. There is a minibus stop where this is the Sunyi new village that was built by the Lutheran Church, but then it's a cooperative between members of the Lutheran Church and also the government of Hong Kong, the Agricultural, Fishery and Conservation Department. Okay, so there are several ways for you to go to Sunyi village. Of course, you can take a taxi. That's the easiest, maybe. Then, of course, you can walk up. It's quite a good exercise. And also, I think if you get out from the Ma On Shan station in this area, I don't really know where the minibus stop, but they have an NR84 stop that goes to Ma On Shan. But because the minibus is actually for the villagers, so it is an hourly kind of operation. So if you miss one, you probably need to use other means. So I've never ride on that minibus. I have to say I always drive up because when I go there, I can always drive up to the peak area, and also because of my connections with the villagers, I can park temporarily there. But I would not encourage you to do it. Now, some people will also, another way, of course, if you drive, is to go to the country park. The country park actually has a parking lot, but I don't know why in the past, they have more vacant spaces, but these days, a lot of people actually park their car there. they even cover it, as if it's like a, a place for them to store the car. So there are very few slots left, and also it's Saturday, so usually it's quite busy. And so, I mean, my my suggestion would be like, to lead a lower carbon life. Maybe you can just take the MTR, or if you don't want to walk because we'll have to walk a lot, then you just take a taxi and be here, and then we will be walking we'll of course from the Shanyi village to the 110 tunnel, the processing plant, and then walk up to the Chichao village and see if we can go in. Sometimes there are dogs, and sometimes there are very people who may not recognize me, then I cannot take you in, but we'll try. And then we'll go to the peak area to see the 240 mile level tunnel and the offices, the former offices, former clinic, and former sort of like eat-out areas, and then go to visit the sort of like the Grace Youth Camp. They know that we are going, and they are very kind, and they will be there for us. Yes.
Fantastic.
So that's this kind of situation. I prepare a little information, so I'm sure Claire will send it out later on. And okay, another thing very important is that because of the social distancing measures, so we can only stay 4 at most in a group. So I will bring the sort of like for the tour, the microphone system. So you need to bring your own earphone like this. Now, no Bluetooth, okay? You have to bring this one with the line, okay? Otherwise, it cannot be used, so that you can actually hear what I say even when you are like far away. So remember to bring your earphone. If possible, do the RAT before you come. Bring some water, wear comfortable shoes, ladies, no high heels, and also maybe an umbrella or a hat. If you, well, maybe you don't need snack because you can patronize, the youth Grace Camp for their cookies. I would highly recommend that. I think their coffee is incredible as well. So, have I missed anything?
That's very comprehensive.
Yes.
Thank you, Mikam. So for those who haven't signed up for the tour for this Saturday, check the chat box in this Zoom right now. We have leave the sign up link. So thank you again, Mikam.
Okay, thank you for having me.
I have to tell you a little secret that my family is from Chichao.
Ah, okay. That's good.
So thank you everyone for joining our discussion today, and hopes to see many of you in this coming Saturday event. Have a good evening.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.